Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we are super happy to have you here, and we just ask that you bring an open mind and heart to your listening experience and to be prepared to explore vantage points that I'm convinced will help shift or solidify your current understanding of the ultimate nature of reality in a way that is extremely empowering. Speaking of exploring powerful perspectives, I would like to gift my book, The Golden Key, Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance to you at goldenkey.gift, where you can get the audio or ebook as my gift to you by using the code POSITIVEHEAD at checkout. All right, all you positive heads, on this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Seana Zelazo here with me on the show. Seana is an intuitive coach and author of the new book, The Way of Inanna, a heroine's guide to living unapologetically, which is a myth made manifest as it explores the goddess's myths within a modern day context. Super excited to have you here. Hello, Seana. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one, and excited to talk more about your book and all the things you're doing in the world. Before we dive in, I want to start with my cliche opening question, and it is this. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You got 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
Oh, well, my passion is definitely focused on helping uplift humanity. For sure, my natural orientation is to help people see their life through the lens of their soul's journey. So my hope is that the work that I do helps people to live consciously, and in so doing, recognize and remember that we are all one. And in that process, help restore balance to the earth plane and bring healing about internally and externally.
Beautiful. Love that. Well, if you would, give us a little bit of backstory, how you ended up, doing the things that you're doing in the world. Obviously, you're an intuitive and a channel and, spiritual coach and guide and author. You're doing all the things. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about how you got to where you're at, whatever feels relevant to share.
Wonderful. Okay. So I was raised in a home that was very receptive to my intuitive orientation.
And that's a nice change.
I know. My mother was just completely aligned.
How cool.
So she fostered it for sure. And it really, I will say that my spiritual identity has been my most salient, quite literally all along. And as such, I was interested very early on in things like near-death experiences and end of life, and not in a morbid way, but death has always been very fascinating to me.
Sure.
Since I was really little. So I first began my career as a healer doing body work, and my intention of going to massage school and learning all different modalities of healing was to work with folks that were dying, so I could do touch therapy with people that were passing.
Wow.
And then I decided that in doing massage, I decided that I wanted to go into psychotherapy and do hospice social work. So I went to graduate school and became a licensed psychotherapist, a social worker, and did hospice social work, which was so incredibly beautiful. And then after doing hospice social work, I went into private practice as a psychotherapist. And then when my son was born, I just moved away more towards the spiritually oriented aspects of my work to support a more intuitive process. And it's very hard to try to fit a psychotherapeutic session, or a soul-oriented session into something that I have to hand the insurance company to reimburse me for.
Right.
So I moved away from the psychopathology, that orientation, and just really allowed the what was showing up for me, which was what was really going on with the soul, what was presenting as past life issues and issues around, karmic balancing, things that I couldn't really address as a psychotherapist, or at least wearing
Right.
that hat. Um,
Right.
so I made that shift. And I would say all along, I have been in connection to the divine feminine for sure.
Mm.
That for sure was an early connection. My relationship with Inanna, the goddess about whom this book is written, really, I feel as though I came in with my connection to her. She is a goddess of the death mysteries, and I certainly was interested in death very early on. So now I feel like this it was really in deepening my work with her, deepening my connection with her, that I felt a really strong visceral orientation towards being a priestess of hers in past life. So
Mm.
today it just feels as though I'm continuing something that I've already done,
Yeah.
which is really fun. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And it's the mysteries of death, as you put it. It's like that's something that you know scares a lot of people, and I'd imagine you would say what my feelings are about death is really death is a birth. The same way when we're born to this dimension, we die in some sense, some part of us to where we came from, right? It's like it's a door. They're both doors. And
For sure.
I imagine you would agree with that.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. And we do really live in a culture that is very afraid of death. And if we look at it from the lens that you're describing, it really supports. I mean, this is one of the things that I felt equipped with through my journey through hospice and then moving into psychotherapy, which is that it prepared me for transition of all kind.
Yeah.
So I was steeped in end of life, but it was really ready me to help people through the transition of their, the end of their marriage or launching a child or any of the things that you might come into therapy for.
Right. Right. Well, if you would, you mentioned something that jumps out as very interesting to me. You feel like, this journey with Inanna is bridging over multiple lifetimes for you. And here you are sort of bringing the teachings and story and so forth back again. So maybe you could share, we've heard a little of your backstory. Maybe you could share a little of, Inanna and what, you hear about different goddesses and gods and, these sorts of things, and some more known than others. And so I don't feel like Inanna is necessarily the top of the list, maybe Aphrodite's up there, more known,
Definitely.
if you will, and a
Definitely.
few others. So if you would just share, whatever comes up for you to share that feels relevant to share regarding Inanna.
Absolutely. So Inanna is the Sumerian goddess of love and war, and she
Mm.
has many epitaphs. So she is known as the evening and the morning star, as representing Venus.
Mm.
She is the queen of heaven and earth, but through her most well-known myth, the descent of Inanna, she comes to be associated with death, the underworld, right? She is one of the reasons I love her so much is because she is a goddess who really insists on her physicality. And that was something I hadn't seen in a lot of other goddesses, in the sense that she brings spirit into matter, which is so relatable to us here as in human
Sure.
form, trying
Right.
to move through our spiritual evolution. And she really emerges as one of the earliest teachers of ascension. So her descent story, which is the most popular,
Mm-hmm.
the book goes through many others, but I do talk about the descent of Inanna. And in this story, she goes through her death and into the underworld and dies. And she's dead for 3 days and 3 nights, which is this time frame that gets later sort of associated with, even the story of Jesus, right, and his own
Mm.
resurrection. So this came first, right, for the
So you're
story of Inanna.
saying with the Sumerian story around Inanna predating Jesus is the
Yes.
3 days, 3 nights thing. Interesting.
Yes, yes. And it's really a story of initiation. And this is that idea of that, death and rebirth, even as a practice in the mystery schools, this sort of thing. So The fact that she is one of the earliest teachers of ascension, and the reason she's coming forward now, and she's coming forward in a lot of ways around the world. Literally, people are being inspired to learn about her, and I think this is her energy really reaching out and tapping folks on the shoulder and saying, "Don't you remember?" But the
Right.
medicine that she represents, the teachings around ascension are so important for today, because we are positioned for this incredible movement towards higher consciousness and a restoration of balance. And so she's almost emerging, I would say, as a guide to the Earth's ascension as well as the ascension of the collective. So she's also very relatable to us. Again, I want to go back to this notion of her connection to her physicality. There's so much we can say about that. She's just so inspiring in her prioritization of her own pleasure. And but it's such an interesting differentiation between her and other goddesses, because in the human form and on our spiritual journey, we often are looking to transcend the physical and just kind of move towards the spiritual.
Right.
And she's saying, wait, this is part of it. This is part of your spiritual journey. And certainly in the movement towards ascension, if we're using this form as a vehicle towards our own ascension, it's holy. And she reminds us of that. So she's also extremely multidimensional and so willing to accept all aspects of herself, which is this sort of representation of, unity within, which is, I think, so necessary on an external level as well.
Right. Very, very interesting. And so I know in the book, you talk about sort of the sacred narratives, the gates that Inanna sort of goes through in her soul's journey from awakening to ascension. And so I'm really curious about that and how that, maybe you can share some of that journey here. Obviously, people want to go deep, they'll get the book and read. But share, and how that sort of, relates to our own journey.
Absolutely. So the notion of the gates does come from the descent story, where I'll just give you a little info about that particular story. So she has a call to, it's really a call to spirit, but she hears a calling to she's just existing as Queen of Heaven and Earth, and in this wonderful positive life experience, and something calls to her to descend and explore the underworld. The underworld is a place from which no one returns. But Inanna, who's completely unapologetic and owns her, has complete confidence in herself, she considers this, but goes forward anyway. And there's a whole sort of backstory as to why as well. She doesn't really know, but she sort of knows on an unconscious level. The unconscious piece I get into in the book, but she's definitely feeling this like desire to make known the unknown. So her sister, Ereshkigal, is the queen of the underworld of the great below. And her sister's husband just died. And so she goes down, and before she goes down, she's sort of on some level considering that perhaps she's going to visit her sister who's in mourning, and to attend the funeral of her brother-in-law, I guess we would say. So but before she goes, she makes a plan with her counsel, Ninshubar, where she says, please go to my 3 father figures and ask them for help if I don't come back in 3 days and 3 nights. And there were these deep instructions that she laid out with great foresight. And then she readies herself to go down into the underworld, and she puts on all of these 7 various accoutrements that represent her earthly possessions, if we will, but also her power. And she descends, and she gets to the outer gate, and she knocks on the door, and Mehdi, who is the gatekeeper, answers the door. And she's in her fashion declares that she's here to see her sister. And he's rather struck by her light, glory,
Radiance.
radiance.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Because he's in the underworld and it's quite a contrast. And so he closes the door. He says, I have to go tell Ereshkigal. And he goes to Ereshkigal, who's quite upset and quite envious, especially when Nettie says, oh, she's larger than life.
Yeah.
And Ereshkigal literally like slaps her thigh, bites her lip. And she says, lock all the gates to the underworld and make her strip an item of clothing off at each one before she enters. So he does this. And of course, Inanna, who's the queen, is not really happy about having to give anything up, but she's essentially acquiesces, says, fine, okay. So she comes to these 7 gates, and at each one she has to strip so that she's forced to enter the underworld naked and bowed low in humility. And then Inanna goes to Ereshkigal, and Ereshkigal fixes the eye of death upon her and kills her and hangs her on a nail.
Wow.
As a corpse. Yes. And then there's an ensuing process of helping her rise, that one of her 3 fathers, her grandfather Enki, supports her in. And this is the idea, is that each of the gates represents a purification, if you will, of the 7 chakras. And in our process of ascension, there's a healing, of a level of raising our vibration that's occurring here as we heal. When we heal, we lift our vibration. So the way that I structured the book is I took various myths and hymns and aligned them with a gate that is analogous to current life situations that help us come into a place of wholeness by virtue of healing. So did you want me to go through the various gates, or what feels resonant?
Yeah, that would be great. I think this
Okay.
is fascinating. Now, I do have one quick question.
Sure.
So this sort of narrative, how she descended and had to go through the gates to get to her sister. This is based off of the Sumerian sort of myth around her. So this isn't like your version of it. It's your retelling. That's
yes.
your retelling of her. Okay, got it. Very cool.
Yep, it was pieced together, in clay tablets that were pieced together to reveal this story. And what's so cool about the Sumerian mythology is that it was not reinterpreted. It was just translated and handed to us,
Yeah.
So, I mean, by extraordinary work by Sumerologists around the world and archaeologists, but it really is the way it was written, which is really important in the preservation of divine feminine consciousness.
Right. It hasn't been passed through
Yes.
King James or someone similar didn't get a hold of it and try and adjust things to their own, end and desires. Now,
That's right.
One thing that's interesting, and maybe you can verify this, from what I recall, the ancient Sumerian text is like the oldest writings that we know of on the planet, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And even the first poet who's been known to sign her name to her work, Enidwana, she wrote these. She had a very long list of works that included 3 long poems about Inanna. And so while she was a high priestess of Inanna's father, Nana, she really, her heart was, it's almost like she had this deep love affair with Inanna. She was in service of Nana, but her heart was with Inanna. So
Interesting.
even the first poetry that was, had an author's name assigned to it was from this time. So, and about her, it's very, very, that's the interesting thing, is that it does feel quite a bit like we're going back to the beginning today.
Yeah,
we're kind of going back now to reestablish what perhaps we tried to do before, and now we're doing, hopefully.
Run it back. Try it again.
Yes,
if at first you don't succeed, try again.
That's right. And she's here to support this. And she's, being the goddess of love and war, and that sort of duality, it really is, it's like the idea of fierce love. I don't see her personally, even though some of the mythology does depict her as very aggressive or whatever. I don't see her this way. I see that more of a symbolic, like a slayer of separation consciousness. That kind of way.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. So yeah, if you would take us through kind of a little bit more detail on these gates, that would be fascinating to hear about.
Okay, wonderful. So I am, the way that it is structured is not sequentially or hierarchically through the chakra system. And that's by intention, in the sense that Inanna really represents sort of the plasticity of our evolutionary process, that it's always evolving and always shifting. And so it's not linear. And so while gate 1 maybe is, so, you might think that gate 1 is associated perhaps with the root chakra and the sort of that traditional trajectory, but it isn't. And it's an invitation, and I do highlight this in the book, that we're going to start in our own, with our own sort of related chakra, where there's the most healing that wants to occur. So the area that has the most wounding. But in the way that it's set up in the book, I start with the descent of Inanna as gate 1, and this is related to the crown chakra and the development of faith in oneself, and that it certainly equipped her. She began to sort of access that faith. This really started her journey of ascension. We really, the sort of, we could think of it as a key code to our path of ascension, is to have faith in ourselves and to have faith in general in the universe.
Sure.
The second gate is it's about healing our ancestral relationships, and this is based on the myth Inanna and the god of wisdom, which is one of my favorite. I love this particular myth, and this is related to the throat chakra in the sense that when we heal our ancestral relationships, we're given this opportunity to really assess what we want to bring forward, what we want to let go, what isn't ours to carry or perpetuate. And in the experience of reclaiming our unique voice, we can discern what gifts we want to take forward from our family line or familial line.
Right.
This particular myth begins with Inanna, who then goes to her grandfather to retrieve his May, is what they're called, but they're the sacred cultures of the land. And she wants to receive these as something that she then passes on to her people. But in the process, the very beginning of the myth, she's in this experience of reflecting on literally, she's gazing upon her holy vulva, and she's going into this meditative process with her creative capacity. And that's so significant to me, because it's really an example of how the idea of tapping into the divine feminine energy within the generative center of the second chakra. So, but this is actually about the throat chakra, because she reclaims her voice to be able to pass on her power and not to use it for herself or her own self-aggrandizement. So this third gate is about moving beyond addiction, and that's related to the solar plexus. This particular myth is called the Hulupa tree, and the Hulupa tree is a myth about Genesis and a myth about Inanna coming into her own as a woman and a queen. But in order to come into this full expression of herself, she has to contend with some beings that have taken up space in the tree she wishes to use to build her throne and her bed, which is her queendom and her sexuality or womanhood. And these 3 beings she has to release. And there's a whole process there, which is equated with our attachment to addictive energy, addictive tendencies.
Interesting.
So it's really a story about really readying ourselves for the path of ascension by virtue of practicing non-attachment and moving beyond fear. So this is the connection with the solar plexus. In gate 4, we go into a chapter around achieving positive body image and self-esteem, which is related to a myth called the courtship of Inanna and Dumuzi. And this is a myth wherein she really prioritizes her pleasure and she owns her glory and her beauty. And it's related to the second chakra. So the second chakra is is, of course, the generative center, but it's related to our appetites and our capacity for joy. So this chapter really helps us reclaim a positive relationship. And it's useful because so many, not just women, but so many of us have a very conflicted relationship with our body. And
Right.
Inanna stands out as someone who provides the antidote for this. In gate 5, we look at sacred boundaries and erecting sacred boundaries, and it's related to the root chakra, which is all about safety. This is done through 3 hymns to Inanna. These 3 hymns that depict her as various aspects of Venus in the sky and her different cycles, where she honors her multidimensionality, and she really highlights how to integrate the sort of multiplicity of ourselves and to wear the various hats, to really own where we are in any given moment. Like in psychotherapy, if I was wearing my therapy hat, I wouldn't, be acting as mother, so she shifts with these sacred boundaries, she shifts this. But this is important because today, those that are gonna, the folks that are going to be drawn to this text are folks that are here as agents of change. And they are definitely, they may contend with a felt sense of fear about returning to the role they've always played through history. There may be some unconscious associations that they have with being, considered heretical for defending truth. And so it's really an important piece to establish a sense of safety within the root chakra and to heal that for today and to reclaim our mission and what we came here to do. The 6th gate is about transcending the binary. And this is a third eye issue wherein we develop the discernment to know not where we're being sort of forced by arbitrary confines of culture, but where we are. What is our road? What is our path? And we need the discernment of the third eye intact to be able to help us see, who are we? What is our truth? And so we look at a myth called the Holy One, where she quite literally balances the masculine and the feminine in this just wonderful, beautiful journey. It's a parade of her people to her statue in this process, but they're embodying, like, one side of them is dressed in the masculine way and one side is dressed in a feminine way. And it really is highlighting this balance, which is integral to everything that is Inanna. She reconciles her polarities. She's in a place of deep balance in her masculine and feminine. And that's a really significant concept when we think of, sort of climbing the tree of life. It's necessary for us to reconcile our polarities. So the transcending the binary offers us this chapter offers us a way to find what is true by coming into balance within ourselves, and that we're not forced. Inanna does not like to be confined or limited at all. She'll push back against it in the biggest way. So she's a beautiful invitation to see what is true for us. She gives us permission, and she was doing this, literally like over 4,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And then gate 7 is called surrender to ascend. And this is, it takes the latter part of the descent story, picks up where we left off, and incorporates another aspect of that story that's called the dream of Dumuzi, who is her beloved, and then the return where she ascends. And what this particular gate is related to is the heart chakra, and it is all about since our heart ultimately is what is in our heart is what shows up in our reality. It's an invitation. This chapter invites us to assess whether through our journey there are any lingering, outdated, erroneous beliefs that are still present, because whatever's in our heart is going to impact our reality. And if it's outdated and even unconscious, it's still going to show up. So we want to upgrade that. And also we want to arrive at the wisdom of the heart to then go forward in our ascent and in our movement through our life, our death, our rebirth, to move from the experience of the heart center. So the book ends with a chapter that helps integrate it. But ultimately, the intention of this is to take us through a way of understanding our life so that we feel empowered by looking at the situations that present as initiations instead of things that happen to us that are knocking us off center. If we engage them as though they are initiations, we bring a level of confidence and courage, and we feel there's a reason it's occurring, and it inspires us. So
yeah, I love that. It's so important learning how to. I think that's such a upgrade moment for all of us on our own journey when we start to reframe those challenging experiences as, okay, this isn't happening for me. I mean, this isn't happening to me, it's happening for me. And I think that is one of the big turning points in a person's journey to remembering and ascending, if you will.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. So I'm curious, and I don't know if it's a spoiler alert or not, but I'm assuming after the 3 days and 3 nights, Grandpa was successful in pulling her out of off the wall, if you will.
Yes, in the most beautiful way, in the sense that he's an alchemist. His name is Enki. And so, the significance of an alchemist who helps with the ascension is so beautiful. And she is herself an alchemist as well. And she has a very strong connection with him, for sure, because he shows up in her mythology quite a bit. There's an alignment there, for sure. And he develops, he takes dirt from underneath his fingernails to create two beings that are neither male nor female. Again, this transcending the binary. So beautiful and so empowering. And they are also representative, therefore, of the liminal. And so they can move between the worlds in their liminality. And they are given, one is given the water of life and one is given the food of life. And so they go down to the underworld and they see Ereshkigal, the queen of underworld, Inanna's sister. And she's on the floor, lying on her back, and her hair is all the mess spread all over the floor. And she's moaning. And it appears, to your point where you were saying earlier about death being two sides of the same coin, in our discussion earlier, is that she's going through what seems like labor pains. And she's moaning and she's saying, oh, my back, oh, my insides and my outsides, oh, my stomach, which very much sounds like a woman in labor going through back labor.
Right.
So the two beings that are actually flies, that are these creatures, these beings that Enki brought forward from the dirt under his fingernails, they are told that she will be in distress, and they are told by Enki to mirror her distress and be present for her. So they do, and they start literally echoing her words. And she's struck. I mean, she's down in the underworld, right? So she doesn't have people paying attention to her and offering kindness and support. So she's struck, and she's like, who are you? And if you're mortal, I'll give you this. If you're, she offers something to them, and they knew that she would, because Enki told her. And Enki said, ask for the corpse hanging on the wall. And so they essentially hold this sacred space for her. They mirror to her pain. They're inviting in this compassionate exchange, to which Ereshkigal responds beautifully. And they then are given the corpse on the wall, and they pour the water of life and the food of life on her, and she's brought back to life. So yes, and then there's a whole series of experiences that happen afterwards, but she is restored. Yes.
Wow. Yeah. It's interesting thinking about her being hung on the wall too. I mean, that sounds not so different from, from the cross.
Exactly. 100%, which is why it's so valuable to remember the energy of the divine feminine and the power. The divine feminine, what's so just beautiful about it is that it's not divine feminine consciousness doesn't want to have dominance, doesn't want to have power over anything. It's
Right.
unifying and inclusive. It's circular. So it's about being in balance with the divine masculine. There's no dominance at all, which is what we need right now.
Well,
Sure.
yeah, and I, that's an interesting thing that you bring up, and I remember a long time ago having someone on the show. This is years back, who does some level of soul reading. Well, I haven't experienced yours, which we talked about a possibility of doing here in a bit, but I'd imagine there's some overlap, and I remember that was the part of her reading with me was like, Brennan, one of the reasons you have the success that you do in life is due to your very healthy balance of masculine and feminine. And I look at my own child, and he's very much that way, very, very much, a mix of these energies in a very healthy way, I feel. And so I'm curious if you think, that is something, and I feel like I'm seeing that as something that more of younger children, younger souls coming in, it's like much more of this sort of, balanced version, as opposed to, I think of my grandfather, who's like, straight off the movie City Slickers. If you ever saw that, like what's his name? I'm forgetting his name now, but like the really tough old cowboy, like that's like, you go back a few generations and that was like what it meant to be a man. And now it seems like there's a lot more balance coming in.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more about the younger generation. It definitely feels as though they're coming in too with like more aspects of their DNA turned on.
Yeah.
They are just so incredible. Yes.
Yeah.
And equipped with quite strong wills, which is like, so wonderful for their mission,
Yeah.
But powerful, they're like coming in and looking at us like, you want me to listen to you? Like, I know way more than you.
Yeah, right.
We have to be humbled and yet, guide them as much as we can. But they're totally teachers for us, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's an interesting thing too, is to some degree, I mean, obviously there's unique situations always that you can't completely stereotype, things ever. There's always, some anomaly, but it does seem, generally speaking, that the souls that are coming in, there's more awareness and more, it's like, which makes sense, and, us being the evolution of our parents, generally speaking, and on it goes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And they chose well and wisely, right? The parents they choose to come into, they're definitely parents that can help them integrate this new way.
Yeah.
Which you're totally doing for your child, for sure.
Yeah.
How old is your child?
He's actually 23.
Amazing.
Yeah. And it's wild for me to think about because I still think I'm 23. But but it's funny because he's very much like old soul energy, I would say, more than me. I think it's almost like I'm more youthful in some ways. I mean, not to say he's not youthful, but, I'm just such a kid at heart, and he's, it's so, and in his case, his mother and I are very like yin and yang, I'm doing a lot of light work and the planet, and there's some very heavy, dark things going on with her energetically. So it's very much like, in his case, it feels like he chose like, okay, I'm going to take, the light and the dark and sort of transmute and find the balance there in a way.
So Inanna, I love it.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah, it's definitely, she's, I've talked about it on the show. I won't go into it now, but it's pretty extreme, like, with her. And it's kind of like we're polarities, and he's very balanced in the middle. I'm grateful, grateful that he's so balanced, but,
yes.
So I know in the book also you share some rituals and practices that kind of go along with. Is there any that would be relevant to and easy to share on this episode?
Sure. Well, the reason, and I'll just sort of give a little background as to why I'm using ritual in there. One is that it's so fast. It's such a beautiful process because it's quick. I mean, when are aligning your intention and your attention in ritual, and that brings us into the quantum field. And so, in that space, that which is required to shift is just a shift in consciousness, which, when you engage in a ritual, that is what you're doing. It's effectively like a line in the sand. So if there's things that we're wanting to release or things that we're wanting to call in upon the ritual, it's like, it literally makes it so. So, and it also, it's an art, right? There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's all very aligned with your intuitive process. And the key is intention and attention, and to use it for the highest good.
I love that. I love that perspective on it, aligning attention and intention. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, it's also fun. That's the other thing. So, in psychotherapy, sometimes we'll come into, think about it, going into a therapist's office and you're sitting down on the couch, and we don't necessarily think of it as super joyful. We think of it more as like pushing up our sleeves and going, all right, we're gonna do this. We're gonna get through this. But and we need that, right? Like psychotherapy is so effective and so wonderful, but there's a levity, not in the sense that it is less potent, but a sense of literal lightness with ritual. Plus, it positions the individual in the role of the healer of themselves. They are their own healer in this way, which is so powerful. And again, like I said, it's fun because you are engaging in the experience of feeling the magic all around you. And it deepens your own. When you're engaging in ritual, you are creating time and space for you to tune into the higher realms. And the more time we spend with the higher realms, the more connected we are, and the easier that communication is.
Right.
It's very powerful. Just to think of a one to share, since we were talking about the heart chakra in the last gate, number 7. In that gate, we do a ritual around upgrading erroneous beliefs. And it's, like I said, it's really quick and fast. And in that particular ritual, it's not just releasing, it's also installing, if you will, not just releasing old erroneous beliefs, but installing new ones. So it's really becoming conscious. It's the whole process of ritual is about becoming conscious. You're becoming conscious with your own process, with your heart, and with how you wish to move through the world, and to really remember what is your mission. What did you come here to offer, and how are you supporting humanity?
Very, very cool. Is it something that would be easily shareable? How to do the ritual?
It is a little involved in the
Okay.
sense that there's like a bit of a sort of ritualistic setting up of the ritual and all of that. Which is actually also super fun. The actual, I do go through in the beginning of the book, there's sort of an invitation to acquire the tools that feel resonant to you, and, whatever those are, whether they're crystals or a pendulum or whatever it is. And also an altar. Some people find it really useful to have that orienting principle at which to do a ritual,
Sure.
Not the only place, of course, but yeah.
Gotcha. Well, I guess you guys, if you want to go deep down the ritual rabbit hole, then get the book. And so now, just to kind of switch gears a little bit here, I know we talked about the fact that you do soul readings.
Yeah.
And I find, of course, and I know the listeners do too, the ability for someone to tap in and kind of, peek behind the veil and discern anything that's useful for themselves or the collective is always super interesting. And so I'm curious about your process there. Is it a channeled thing? Is it or is there multiple modalities that you use? And then if you feel inspired, it wouldn't hurt my feelings at all for you to demonstrate.
Awesome. Absolutely. So the process when I'm doing, and I'll tailor it for you, just to make it easier, because it's a little bit involved in the sense that I usually take somebody through a meditative process.
Gotcha.
I do have a particular prayer that I go through. And I'm tuning into your Akashic records and your guides. And in that
Cool.
process, really what I'm doing is just acting as a mirror. This is very much like what we do in psychotherapy, which is like we're acting as a mirror for our clients. But in this
Right.
way, I'm just acting from my intuitive lens as a mirror for you to be in connection with your own, what I, conceptualize as your divine team. So the way the information that comes through is, it's sometimes people might, I think it's, if they've never done it, they might be a little bit sort of wondering, is it nerve-wracking or something? This is also something people do with psychotherapy. They can be nervous before they go.
Yeah.
But the way that the readings are is that they are all about empowerment. So even if it's delivering information that is maybe not what we wanted to hear,
Sure.
it does it in a way that is empowering and helps you see why. And so you feel expanded, not constricted out of disappointment or frustration.
Sure. Makes sense.
So yeah, so if we can bypass some of that because we've been spending some time together here, and just you were open about it early on. So that's sort of my permission to go in. I'm really boundaried around it because I can sit next to somebody at a coffee shop and I have a really firm boundary around because I feel like it's like being a peeping Tom or something.
Sure. Right.
I don't do that. And I really respect everybody's process. So, but when somebody is asking for it, that's also a way in, and so if you were open, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So the process is, and I typically, although I won't necessarily do that now, but maybe I will. I usually do it with my eyes closed. So because I really can hear with greater and really bring my attention to it with greater clarity. But again, as soon as you were expressing your openness to it, information comes through.
Interesting.
So I'll just share with you.
Yeah, and if you need to close your eyes at all, of course, we're not. You and I are seeing each other now, but we don't share the video.
So we'll close our eyes. I'll close my eyes. So what has been coming through? I mean, right off the bat, and the person that you were speaking about earlier, that gave you that clarity around you being super balanced within your masculine and feminine. Absolutely, that person is completely right on. But that's also related to your mission, right? This teaching of that balance. And this goes way back. Because when I tune into it, it really is you have always been, meaning the lifetimes that you have experienced have really been definitely oriented towards paths of service, paths of compassionate service, but really in this role of, I want to say, it's a position of empowerment, empowering others, but there's something for you about real strong frustration about the silencing of the truth. You have had many lifetimes where you have witnessed, you have yourself been silenced, but you have more frequently been silenced, been witnessed others be silenced. And that to me is so infuriating because your power to stop that, throughout history was at times challenged, and that felt like, something that you aligned with, like, I'm going to continue to fight for the truth to be spoken, but in doing so, I have to support those truth tellers, of which you are one, which you are, from being silenced. So you've stood in roles where you've definitely stood in roles where you tried to get those that have been considered heretical off the hook, if you will, out of prison. You really have worked behind the scenes and in the front, sort of like going in front of courts defending. Because it wasn't just that you saw this as an injustice, you saw it as a way to allow for truth to be brought forward. And that when those that were silenced were being silenced, you knew it was because they were telling the truth. And you were like, ooh, we need to help this. Again, you are yourself a truth teller, but there's a lot of, I would say, sensitivity that you have to the throat chakra, to the idea of literally others experiencing trauma, like literally being hung, that kind of thing, but
Wow.
the symbolic energy of that. And so for you, your message, part of your life throughout your lifetimes, part of your message is to help empower others to find their voice and to speak their truth. So you do it, you allow your own truth to come forward, but you also, and so beautifully, support others in their process. And that's huge in terms of the restoration of balance, because that will help us come back instead of being totally off kilter. If we allow that which has not been spoken, to be heard, to be reclaimed, we move back into balance. And that energy of you being a balanced soul, someone who's definitely integrated the masculine and the feminine, is why you felt safe enough going before those that were considered heretics, which many were women throughout history. And you were not in a position where you felt like, oh, I shouldn't do that. You were always in like, of course I'm going to do this. And the reason is because you have that balance within yourself. So you were never afraid to do that. Anything you want to ask about that? Anything coming up for you that you want to ask for clarity?
Yeah. I'm really curious. I mean, that definitely rings true, feels true. I mean, I even think about this podcast. I mean, there's been, at least half a dozen podcasts that have spun off of people that I brought on to give them their,
Beautiful.
their voice, give them the confidence, and, even adding, I don't know of anyone else. I mean, I'm sure it's out there, but there's so many podcasts. But even, now I have a co-host who I ultimately used to just be me, and now she does multiple days a week, and she originally reached out, just let me help in some way, and then years later it turned into, okay, here 2 days you are and
Beautiful.
so that's definitely resonates as something that I get a lot out of doing, and I'm curious, when you sort of tap into this, do you see it generally, or do you see specifics like, particular lifetime or, details?
I do. I see all of it, both
Wow.
specifics and more of a general. And the specifics, like I'm literally seeing you before a court
Wow.
defending. There's about 4 women that you're defending. There's
Wow.
something very interesting too about that, around that it is that we all have wounding as a result of, anyone who's been silenced has wounding. They are contending perhaps with a sense of shame, right? So like that's an effective mechanism utilized by, we'll say for overarching definition, the patriarchy, to shut someone down is to shame them, make them feel ashamed.
Right.
And that really ticked you off. You were like, how
Right.
dare you? Because, and so you like really assessed it from a super skillful position, wherein you said, okay, so how do we heal this without experiencing resentment? How do we
Yeah.
bring this around without being held back or tethered to the trauma of that through resentment? And
Yeah.
when you focused more on, let me help empower you to find your truth and speak your voice, it created a way for the individual to not focus on the trauma of being silenced, but on the experience of the joy, the sense of empowerment of reclaiming their voice. So all of a
Wow.
sudden, the focus isn't on a lower vibrational frequency like trauma and pain,
Yeah.
but it's all of a sudden on, wow, how can I help others do this kind of thing? It's very much a positive momentum that you set in motion, which is super skillful. And I want to say, you already know this. I know you already know this. I can feel that you already know this. But is that you're, you have a deep connection to the great mysteries and the various inroads to that, which is why you wanted to defend the truth. You saw that as a way to keep the truths, the mysteries of the universe and of our process here on earth alive. If we stop silencing those who have access to those truths, whether they're intuitives, whether they're midwives, whether they're, whatever it was that throughout history was considered heretical, scientists, visionaries, artists, your connection to that truth is connected to the desire for us, your connection to us speaking our truth is connected to the desire you have for us to have access to the wisdom that allows us to do what we came here to do. You know? And so it's, you definitely are like what I would put in the category of sort of the energy of the high priest, sort of seeking to make available this wisdom throughout all of your, like in different iterations, of course, and in different geographical locations and physical forms and all of that. But it's really too on some level, what you're doing today. And because you are disseminating this is that a role in a sense of, as you might conceptualize as a high priest, right? Where you're sitting there creating opportunity, not in a dogmatic way, in a way that says, here are some insights that if they resonate with you, allow them to support you. And if not, that's great too, but now you'll learn them, you'll have witnessed them. So it's very much like, we are who we are, at the core of our being. And you already know this about yourself. So it's not new to you, but let it at least confirm for you what you've always known.
Right. No, it's super interesting to hear, that's because that's something that I think we often think about, or I do anyway, like, okay, well, other lives, there must be some common thread, and perhaps then there's some great departures in other lives at some level where it's like, sure. You experience the contrast of, something way different than, and it's like in chunks, perhaps in most recent incarnations, it's like a similarness, and maybe it's, I wonder, I don't know for sure, but it all, of course, makes sense that, and I've heard it said before, oftentimes there will be, you'll even look the same in certain lifetimes and things like that. So I guess I'm curious if the same way you can tap into the before, I guess linearly speaking, and I guess you would probably agree, there's also this idea that it's all happening now on parallel. My 5th birthday party is on another channel. These other lifetimes, they're happening, on another channel that we're not tuned into in this moment. Well, you're more tuned into than I am, perhaps.
No, you are, absolutely.
But I'm curious if you get the same perceptions regarding a soul's journey and what would be viewed as a linear future as well.
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. The way it shows up for me is, we're presented with free will. So free will always, that's where we are going. Yep. It's one of the laws of the universe, right? So
sure.
I can see where your soul is aligned, where your free will is aligned right now, but free will can change on the flip of a dime. So it's more of bringing your consciousness. It's like really, when people tune into or want to get insight into future events, it really, for me, is to support the individual in looking at how to fully inhabit, like truly tune into their heart to see what is it that I want, not on autopilot, not, being inspired by conditioning from the past or looking for a reparative experience. Sometimes we're pulled to experiences because we're seeking healing, a reparation, but to go into the heart and really bring your awareness into that place to then look at the next steps, and it will call it forward. As I said, the heart is the most, it is the most magnetic aspect of our being. So what is in here is what shows up in the reality. So when we think about future, and you're wanting to impact it in the most, aligned way with you, bring your consciousness to your heart, and it will help you bring a future forward that reflects that. It's all about bringing your awareness into that center. And that's why it's so powerful for us to to practice living in alignment with loving choices, to constantly train ourselves to engage fear in a way that helps us transcend it. So we're not being ruled by it. And so that we move from fear to love. The more, it's just like working out, you're strengthening an orientation. And the more equipped you are with bringing your consciousness into the heart, the more equipped you are when you think about manifestation and all of these beautiful concepts, it really is so related to uh, the heart center. And so
Mm-hmm.
not from a like an attachment desire, I want, I don't know, some physical object, a car or something like this, but more I am tapping into the felt experience of fulfillment of whatever goal I'm trying to actualize. What do I feel like once I've accomplished that? And
Yeah.
tap into that feeling. What does it feel like when I have, I found the love that I was looking for, and I'm sitting in this place of peace, or I experience this unconditional love of myself, so much so that I can just exist in a state of equanimity because I just feel so groovy because of where I
Mm.
am. That energy calls it into being, and that exists in the heart. When we feel that, it's in the heart. So future really is up to your heart, ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes total sense. And of course, you've also, I always say that about any sort of a intuitive reading. I think, if anyone ever speaks in absolutes regarding that sort of stuff, I
Right.
tend to shy away because I definitely agree that it's potentials
Yeah.
and source, our higher self, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, is
Yes.
infinite in potential, and there's infinite timelines and that sort of thing. So I'm just curious, yeah, if you get, the same way you sort of see the linear past
Yeah.
potentials or things that have gone before, if it comes in the same way. But I imagine it is a little more complex when you talk about, all the potentials.
Yes. And it's really, it's what I'm tuning into is where you are within your heart now.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
which can change. So,
Yep, yep.
I bring forward more the information of understanding where we are, what is our what we're endeavoring to do here, and how like things fit together, right? It really is when I tune into something, it's like a zoom out lens perspective of how everything's um, working in alignment together, where you have contracts with others to support them in their evolution, and they have contracts with you. And there's an honoring, there's karmic balancing that we've agreed to come in to support each other with. All of these beautiful experiences come together and
Mm,
make up our life. And so it's the experience of understanding that and just training ourselves to look at that, like the reframing, we were using that word before, that the reframing it, like you train yourself to say, pause, let me take a zoom out lens perspective, let me borrow the vision of the hawk and see how is this all working together, because then we see that we're all connected, and that's the piece that is what Earth is wanting us to restore, is this concept of unity consciousness, because it changes everything, but it always
yeah.
has to start within.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that. That's very
Absolutely.
fascinating, insightful, empowering. So, yeah, super appreciate you tapping in there a little bit. And
Absolutely.
as we kind of wind down here, I do have one question that I love to go to. That's sort of story time. I'd love to hear if you have a story of synchronicity or serendipity or a positive paranormal story that feels fun and inspiring to share.
Yeah. So I'll just bring, I mean, I have so many because it
I can
just
imagine.
life is like that, right? It's just so fun.
Yep.
But I'll share the one about Inanna, which uh happened. So I was okay. So I'll start by saying every month my sisterhood and I do a moon ritual. And because we're all surfers, part of this ritual is that we surf under the moonlight and then we do our ritual. But
Wow.
this particular night, it was a blood moon, and I was I was finishing up. I had to get the last part of the book done and into the editor by the end of that night. And so I said, let's just do our ritual on our own. We're not going to surf tonight. And so they were doing that, and I was at the computer, and it was like 11, probably 11:30 at night, and I was really wanting to do my ritual. This is really important to me. So
Mm-hmm.
and this is this cool, beautiful blood moon. And which was visible through my window through as I was like finishing up the last edit and getting it to the editor. And then I hit send and I went outside and I did my ritual. And as I got outside, the clouds came over, and so I couldn't see the moon anymore. And it started to rain, and I did have an umbrella with me, which probably wasn't good for what happened later. So then all of a sudden, as I'm doing this ritual, and in the ritual, I'm saying, part of it is like, I'm praying that Inanna is, happy with what I put forth into the world about her. And,
Sure.
And that I translated her message well. And so all of a sudden, then thunder was like in my backyard, and then it came to my front yard, and then I went to the backyard, the front. It was this bizarre thing, and it was just me, in the middle of the night out there.
Yeah.
And then there was lightning, and the lightning felt like it was like on all sides of me. It wasn't like these strikes, it was like
Yeah.
it was like flashes. And Inanna is known as also as the goddess of thunderstorms and rain. And I totally felt like she was like, yep, you did it.
Wow.
I was like, it felt just very potent. So there's many, many experiences, but I love the ones that feel like you're hearing quite literally from the higher realms.
Yeah. I am with you on that. That is always so magical and inspiring when you connect in that way. So very, very cool. Well, this has been wonderful. I'm so grateful to have the chance to connect with you, and I know the listeners as well. And what is the best way for those that want to connect with you, possibly get a reading, where to get the book, that sort of thing?
The book, The Way of Inanna, A Heroine's Guide to Living Unapologetically, is at bookstores worldwide, booksellers worldwide. So Amazon and all of that. And my website is SeanaZelazo.com. And you can check out readings there and reach out. There's a way to connect with me there. Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes here as well, so they can make sure they get the spelling right. And
yes.
Yeah. Other than that, I have one final question for you, and it is this: in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Seana Zelazo?
The meaning of life is to embody the wisdom of the heart so we can experience love that returns us to source.
Love that. Thank you so much, Seana, for sharing your beautiful voice and wisdom with all of us, and your writing, and just keep up the great work. And
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. And all of you out there for tuning in your beautiful brainwaves and incredible hearts. Until next time, journey well. Love you so much. Also, before we sign off, I wanted to remind you to download the Golden Key audio or ebook as my free gift to you at goldenkey.gift using the Golden Key code POSITIVEHEAD. And please, if you enjoy my gift, leave a positive review on Amazon so others can find the book and unlock their lives with the help of the Golden Key as well.